Doomed Planet. Welcome to the third episode of the Doomed Planet podcast. I am Alex, your host. This time around we have Sex Offender Island. That's really a fancy title for the McNeil Island prison in Washington State. The only jail in the United States that has been a territorial prison, a federal prison, and a state prison, and now it's a civil commitment center. That's where you lock up people, sex offenders in this case, who have already served their, quote, criminal sentences and are now in the, quote, civil system. Does not sound very constitutional. Before we get to that, here are some Doom Planet podcast updates. Now, it seems like we have quickly devolved into a Seattle/Pacific Northwest true crime podcast. And I think our lead story now is always going to have that theme. I mean, I will never run out of Seattle crime stories, but there's more, much more. The different sections of our podcast: Rusty the Media Watchdog, Podcast Shoutout, Facebook Peak, Condiment Vehicle, Green Diversions, Nirvana Walk, Bezos Town. These are all eventually going to be their own podcasts. On the Wild World News Network, millions of downloads, billions in ad revenue. You think I am crazy? Stop back here in a year, and you'll see. So you laugh now, but here's the math. We hope to have one listener for our first episode, the one about Generoso Pope Jr., publisher of the National Enquirer. And then we hope to have 2 listeners for our second podcast, where we did a deep dive into the sordid world of Seattle car dealer Dick Balch. Now, for this episode, episode 3, Sex Offender Island, we hope to have 4 listeners. And we will double the number of listeners every episode until, well, you do the math. At a certain point, every man, woman, and child on Earth will become a listener. So, Sex Offender Island, McNeil Island. It was named in 1841, according to Wikipedia, by Charles Wilkes during a United States expedition exploring the area, named in honor of Captain William Henry McNeil of the Hudson's Bay Company, which was an early experiment in international monopoly capitalism. There was another expedition in 1846, the Robert A. Inskip expedition, and they renamed the island Duntsey after Captain John A. Duntsey of the Royal Navy. Then in 1847, they changed the name back to McNeil. Captain William Henry McNeil, there were 2 L's on McNeil. They changed the name back with only 1 L, and that error was never corrected, so McNeil Island with 1 L. McNeil opened in 1875. There were not a lot of people in this area around that time, or at least not a lot of white invaders. So at first it was a territorial prison. Then from 1904 to 1981 it was a federal penitentiary. And in 1981 until its closure in 2011, it was run by the Washington State Department of Corrections and renamed McNeil Island Corrections Center, where you send people to get corrected on an island. So although Clinton and Joe Biden passed a crime bill that really ramped up our carceral state, we actually have always been living in a carceral state. We had a territorial prison, and guess what? There were Indians locked up there. There were some black people locked up there when it was a territorial prison, and there weren't a lot of African Americans in this area. So many atrocities, we'll go through some of them. During World War II, 85 Japanese Americans who had resisted the draft. Yes, they were if you weren't going to be locked up in a concentration camp in the desert, they wanted to draft you. So these Japanese draft resistors were locked up at McNeil, and they were pardoned by President Harry Truman in 1947. I think we want to use HistoryLink, which is an incredible website about local history. Just kind of go through what Daryl C. McClary says about McNeil Island. Even though McNeil Island operated as a modern model institution, in 1976, the Bureau of Prisons decided to phase out the 107-year-old penitentiary, declaring it obsolete. Imagine a prison on an island has higher operational and maintenance costs. The prison needed major renovation and replacement of all basic systems. So, in other words, the place has always been a hellhole. In the early territorial prison days, there was no heat and no bathrooms, just buckets. McClary mentions that in April of 1979, Fidel Castro instigated the Mariel boat lift. That's when 125,000 Cuban refugees came to the United States, many of them let loose from Cuban prisons, some of them undesirable criminals. McNeil was used to house hundreds of these illegal Cuban immigrants for the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service. And at that time, they only had 60 regular prisoners, in addition to the Cubans. So, according to McClary, by the late 70s, Washington state had a severe shortage of prison space because we were locking people up left and right. A federal court order wanted them to take speedy action to, build more prisons. Eventually, the federal government arranged with the state to let the state take over. Dixie Lee Ray, who was one of our most colorful governors, she wanted to build a $35 million 500-bed prison in Monroe, Washington. She was opposed to the idea of having the state take over McNeil Island. She argued that the island was too beautiful and too expensive to use as a prison, and that it should be a state park. And environmentalists wanted the entire island to be preserved as a wildlife sanctuary. But that is not what America is about. We are not about protecting wildlife. We are about building prisons and locking people up. So the state of Washington announced in 2010 that they were going to close the prison by 2011, and that would save $14 million a year. Imagine if some of our billionaires in this state paid income taxes. I wonder if that would raise $14 million per year. Anyway, and that's when McNeil Island devolved into the Special Commitment Center. It's a post-sentence treatment institution for people designated as sexually violent predators. Civil commitment is the subject of controversy because it allows the involuntary civil confinement of a sex offender after he or she has fulfilled their sentence. It's unconstitutional. Now, some of the people that are under civil commitment at McNeil Island are horrible monsters, but if they've served their sentence, it defies constitutional logic to keep them locked up. Makes me lose faith that there is rule of law in this country. Many, many lawsuits stemming from incidents at McNeil Island. In September 2017, 200 of the 268 inmates filed a lawsuit. They were concerned with the quality of water. They were not provided with bottled water. The suit alleged that their water was cloudy and brown, was contaminated with fecal matter and chemicals, and caused stomach pain and skin rashes from showering, and has been blamed for unexplained deaths. Health reports say the facility's water treatment plant has been on the verge of failure since 2013. An article in the Guardian newspaper from October of 2018. On Washington's McNeil Island, the only residents are 214 dangerous sex offenders. This really would make a good horror movie. Some kids are in a rowboat, and they get lost out there, and they end up on McNeil Island, and then the hijinks ensue. It would be a horror comedy. So the Guardian talked to Calvin Malone. He's in his 60s. He doesn't participate in the treatment offered at McNeil at the Commitment Center. He prefers to focus on other things to make life on McNeil Island better. He has, quote, led a few lawsuits aimed at improvements, one dealing with tobacco use, and another calling into question the facility's water quality. Oh, so Calvin Malone was behind that. He was heavily involved in the Buddhist community, and he has spent years petitioning to have a pagoda built. He enjoys meditating among the gardens that surround the ornate structure. So again, the Civil Commitment Center, you're not locked up in a cell. You're kind of in this building, and you have some privileges for wandering around. It's still a hellhole, and mostly horrible people. I really don't think there are too many innocent people on that island. I could be wrong. If you want to find out what's really happening in our nation's prisons, Prison Legal News is a great resource. Here's an article from 2009. Problems at Washington Civil Commitment Center continue. On July 30th, 2008, Pepega Motesha Jr., 39, a mailroom guard at the Special Commitment Center for Sex Offenders on McNeil Island, was arrested on federal charges of attempting to possess and distribute crack cocaine at the facility. The next day, SCC resident, the SCC term for prisoner, Lawrence Williams, 50, was arrested for conspiracy to distribute crack cocaine and witness tampering. Motesha, who had worked at SCC since December of 2003, reportedly delivered drugs to Williams at least 8 times. Williams had been incarcerated at SCC since he was civilly committed after his sentence for a first-degree rape conviction expired in August of 2002. December 12, 2008, Motesha pleaded guilty to 1 count of attempting to possess and distribute cocaine. The arrests of Motesha and Williams are not the only incidents to occur at SCC, which holds 280 men and 1 woman under prison-like conditions, complete with razor wire fences and video surveillance cameras. In 2006 and 2007, SCC staff discovered contraband 230 times. The contraband included at least 2 instances of child porn on computers, unauthorized video games, Xboxes, PlayStations, cell phones hidden inside shoes, inappropriate magazines, pills, weapons, photos of nude children, and videos of a sexually oriented TV show. One SCC resident, Richard Eugene Jackson, was caught with 760 child porn files on a computer. He was returned to state prison. Another, John Michael Obert, was found with CD-ROMs containing child pornography. Sex Offender Island, that's what goes on there. Does all this talk about an island filled with sex offenders get you in the mood to consume some products and services? If that is the case, now would be a good time to run an ad.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it. Write for Pollution Booklet, Box 1771, Radio City Station, New York.
Okay, we're back. Let's go back in time again. Sometime around 1900, every prisoner on McNeil Island was photographed, and it was a little disorganized. They were in groups. They were standing with their buddies. It wasn't like mug shots. So you have pictures of some very rough-looking white guys. I mean, this was the Wild West for real. Funny enough, you have Native Americans, you have African Americans, and Hispanics being locked up. Can you imagine? Those photos are available online, courtesy of the National Archives. I thought it would be fun to just read some headlines of McNeil Island atrocities as documented by Prison Legal News. Let's see, Montgomery versus McNeil Island Correctional Center, wrongful death, medical neglect. McNeil Island ferry dock accident, 1995. Richardson versus Stewart, Washington Department of Corrections, harassment case. Washington prison health care is substandard, from the Prison Legal News. Here's a horrifying one. System examined in death of Washington prisoner. By the time the guard helped him, the 32-year-old burglar's eyes and skin glowed yellow. Curled up on his metal bunk at McNeil Island Correctional Center, Philip Montgomery's lanky, athletic body lay weak from days of pain and vomiting. We have Stinson versus Washington DOC, Workplace Discrimination Against Homosexual Guard, 2011. Washington sex offender therapist fired for sex-related misconduct. $6,000 awarded for amputated ring finger of prisoner. This is atrocious. Washington state legislators face a unique problem with the prison workers it uses to maintain McNeil Island. Juveniles from the Oak Ridge Community Group Home work in groups of 2 to 6 as dock workers at McNeil Island. The youths are paid $7.16 an hour to assist shipwrights and engine mechanics. Their cheap labor helps keep 8 ferry boats and several barges running. Also working on the island are some of the state's convicted sex offenders. Until 2011, both the juveniles and the sex offenders were housed on the island, but budget cuts forced the boys' prison to close. Boys' prison? I thought it was a community group home. Now the boys are transported from the mainland to work on the island, which means they're not staying overnight on Sex Offender Island. Got just a morass of bad karma on McNeil Island, and we could go on and on and on with prison legal news, the stories they have, but we'll just wrap it up with the several dozen more. Washington DOC fires McNeil Island employee for prisoner fund theft. Really? You need to steal money from sex offenders? Prater versus Washington Department of Corrections. McNeil Island slip and fall. Prisoner chemical injury, 2006. Summary judgment reversed on Washington guards' MRSA claims. Washington prison's water system and meat contaminated with feces. Staff race discrimination. McNeil Island bus accident. McNeil Island ferry dock accident. McNeil Island prison fined $28,000 for improper asbestos removal. Do you know what prison phone justice is? You might want to check out prisonphonejustice.org. There's a nasty PDF file concerning AT&T's contract with McNeil Island Prison. And, the state gets a piece of the action, and AT&T gouges the hell out of prisoners by overcharging for phone calls. Really, the concept of privatized prisons is sickening, and this is kind of one little aspect of that. Privatize prison phone calls so we can really take advantage of desperate people that want to talk to their fucking families. Charge them a fortune to do that. Crazy. Hey, it's time for Rusty the Media Watchdog. Woof. When I was researching this episode, I came across a podcast about McNeil Island called Forgotten Prison. 6 episodes talking about McNeil Island from KNKX Public Radio in Tacoma, Washington. And I think luckily for them, I lost my notes. So we're not going to spend too much time on this podcast. The first fail is the format. You have 2, I think 30-something women doing cutesy scripted banter. And that doesn't work. That's not what a podcast is, right? So instead of the chemistry being there, there is no chemistry between these two. Just sounds like they're reading from a script while pretending to have a conversation. And the other aggravating thing is that they do not once mention the concept of mass incarceration. They do not go into any detail about the drug war and how that filled our prisons with nonviolent offenders. I don't think they once mention anything about race, anything about African Americans or Native Americans or Hispanics being locked up at McNeil. They do go into sordid, depraved detail about the one female offender that's at the Special Commitment Center She was actually just released, but they get really graphic talking about her crimes. I don't think we have to do that on this podcast. So the reporters get to visit McNeil Island, and that's an amazing thing. Of course, they ruin the opportunity by talking about stuff that's really trivial instead of dealing with the major problem of why the fuck we lock so many people up in this country. But when they closed McNeil, they really just did a cold close. They shut off the power and locked the doors and left everything there, half-filled cups of coffee, stuff in the refrigerator. That reminded me of there was a school that closed in South Seattle, and I went to this sale. They were just selling everything, and you could tell, I don't know if this must have been a private school, you could tell that it was a cold close because there was moldy food in the fridge. Everyone still had all their tchotchkes in their desk and spare change and everything. It was fascinating walking through this. So again, Forgotten Island, squandered the opportunity. I took notes while listening to this podcast. I lost the notes, so we will move on. So we'll wrap up the segment on McNeil Island with a look at some old-timey newspapers. And if you want to see racism, go to old-timey newspapers. Maybe the people in Tacoma that did that McNeil podcast could have spent some time looking at old newspapers and then discussing the racism. 10 Chinese caught, found on Whidbey Island by customs officers, to be deported to China. Port Townsend, August 16th. The Chinese raid on Whidbey Island was successful in rounding up 10 Chinamen who cannot explain satisfactorily their presence in this country. The arrests were made Friday and Saturday by Special Agent Mulkey, assisted by Inspector Munn, stationed on the island, and Deputy Marshals Mudgett and Brown. The 10 Chinamen arrested were found scattered about on farms leased by Chinese ranchers. All claimed to have been residents a long time, but could not produce much evidence sustaining their claim. So that would be some early immigration troubles. You want to bring the Chinamen over to work on your farm, and you want them to be illegal, because then maybe you can pay them less. This is from the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, August 18th, 1891. So the commissioner held that the burden of proof rested on the Chinamen and ordered the entire lot deported to China. The men were brought to Port Townsend this evening and then taken to Tacoma on the way to McNeil's Island. The old-timey newspapers like to refer to McNeil Island as McNeil's Island. It was the Cordova, Alaska Daily Times, April 23, 1919. Interior prisoners brought to Cordova. H.R. Tull, Deputy Marshal, and Martin Knoop, Guard, arrived in town on today's train from Fairbanks, with 2 prisoners and an insane man, whom they are taking outside. C.B. Sweeney and John Lazovich, each sentenced to 18 months for grand larceny, are on their way to McNeil's Island Penitentiary. And Andrew Simon, a Kiyukuk native, will be placed in a sanitarium near Portland. There's the Madison Daily Times, October 2nd, 1894. Put poison in food. Desperate attempt at wholesale murder and jail delivery at McNeil's Island. Noted smuggler as leader. Warden and his assistants knocked out and 4 of the prisoners escaped. Attempted wholesale murder and a partially successful jail delivery have occasioned no little excitement at the United States Penitentiary on McNeil's Island. Warden Palmer of the prison and 4 guards had a remarkable escape from death. The prisoners, led by John Wade, a notorious smuggler, who once before made a successful escape, secured poison and placed it in the food of Warden Palmer and his assistants. But for the fact that desperate prisoners used too much of the stuff, not one of the intended victims would have escaped alive. As it was, all of them were made deathly sick. Wow, it just occurred to me that we're not discussing Manson, who was incarcerated on McNeil Island for a while. Some of the people at that time, the warden and a couple of the guards, had been interviewed and say he was a wily bastard, but fuck him, we don't have to cover Manson. Finally, we see the New Britain Daily Herald, Friday, April 25th, 1930. Penitentiary fire turns spotlight on federal prisons, packed to double capacity. Wow, this is the 90s? No, 1930. So I'm not familiar with this story. This could be a whole podcast series in itself. Death of more than 300 prisoners in the overcrowded Ohio State Penitentiary puts bulging federal prisons in the spotlight. Built in 1890 and designed to house 1,500 men, 4,300 were contained in the Ohio prison when it was swept by flames. Not only are federal penitentiaries, in some instances, housing double normal capacities, but jails and reformatories in all parts of the country are being swamped with prisoners. So if this is 1930, we're in the Depression. Maybe people are being locked up because homelessness has always been a crime. Unbelievable. Figures show plight of federal prisons. The 9 United States prisons, that includes Alcatraz and McNeil, now house twice as many inmates as they were built to hold, 12,259. If we jump ahead to 2019, when this podcast was being recorded, according to prisonpolicy.org, there are 237,000 people in state prison, 95,000 in federal prison, 5,000 in juvenile facilities, and an unknowable amount of the population in military prisons, territorial prisons, and local jails. That would be the carceral state of the United States of America. Boy, I did a podcast segment about McNeil Island, and we didn't discuss Manson, and we didn't discuss Alcatraz, which is another federal penitentiary on an island. And one of the ugliest parts of San Francisco, which as of late has become ugliness personified, because when you have millionaires stepping over homeless people on their way to their tech jobs, something is wrong. Anyway, San Francisco, beautiful place. The view is of a prison island. So fuck Manson, fuck Alcatraz, fuck San Francisco, and finally, fuck McNeil Island. Let's move on with the podcast. Okay, it's time for one of our many sections. This is Facebook Peek. That's where I look at a Facebook friend or someone with a public Facebook page and we examine them. All right, now this person has been on my Facebook for 10 years or however long Facebook has existed. Not sure where I know them from, but it's fascinating to see their bizarre, luxurious, and apolitical lifestyle, which involves travel to everywhere. And the traveling is called the drift. So I've seen this over the years. This person travels somewhere, has some fun, goes somewhere else. And there's not much there except scenery and selfies. Not even that much food. And it's completely apolitical. You're not going to hear anything about the local culture of these places that she goes to, unless, they're the servants. The servants were so wonderful. The people that served me were so wonderful. So here we go. The drift continues. Flying from Thailand to Dubai, United Arab Emirates. That's where the people that clean your hotel room are literally slave laborers. Everything is provided. Hashtag love my life. Hashtag grateful. Hashtag it is what you see. Hashtag perfect. Hashtag the drift continues. BFF time, gratitude, I love my life. Oh, there's a picture of food. Oh, there's a white party. Divine in white. Love these two so much. It's these white people dressed in white having a party. Now we're in Leavenworth, Washington, out back in this part of the world. Okay. If you don't know, that's a fake German village in eastern Washington. Here we go. Travel lifestyle hashtag. Hashtag divine. Hashtag beyond the known. Oh, now I'm in New York City. Wow, there's a selfie of me in New York City. The drift. I love that. I am an aimless, wealthy person who has no purpose in life. That's called the drift. By the way, with Facebook Peek, usually if I'm profiling someone that is a Facebook friend, we're just going to delete them to spare them the embarrassment in the very rare chance that they actually listen to this podcast. Oh, here we go. The drift continues. Going to Germany from JFK International Airport. Oh, here we are in Porto, Portugal. Drifting. So you're wondering why are we focusing on this poor woman? Well, because I think no one should be apolitical. If you're traveling around the world, you might want to report to your Facebook friends things that are not perfect in your drift. Now, this is going to be painful, but I'm going to read a whole essay by this woman and from her public Facebook page, so no ethical lapses here. It's been a while since I shared, and soon I'll be drifting again. Here's the update. Here I am, a week retreat at one of my favorite places in Thailand, The Land. It's in an area called Mae Tang, in the northern part of the country. This is my third time in 7 months to visit for rest, reflection, cleansing, yoga, bodywork, and other wellness treatments. It truly is one of my favorite places on earth. The approach is ancient Thai medicine, and the attitude is love. I feel cared for in the highest way possible. Thank you, Von Visa, Intep, Clifford Edwards, Stephanie Earl, Lezik, and all the amazing women, P. Nong, P. Bomb, P. Air, and Ajon Sai, for your nurturing, loving way with me. I am forever changed from my experiences on the land. You gotta wonder what kind of experience she'd have if she showed up there without any money. I came back to Thailand last November after months of traveling, feeling exhausted, out of balance, and confused about my path. That's because your fucking path is traveling around and calling yourself a drifter and doing nothing. My first stop was the land to reset. When I returned to Bangkok after 3 weeks in retreat, I came back to the last breakup with Doug. We'd been traveling together mostly for 2 years, grown together and experienced so much. I thought he was my person for the rest of this life. Can't buy love. That's the one thing money ain't gonna get you, drifter. But seriously, it seems the universe has other plans because we got to the point in our relationship that who we were to each other was no longer sustainable. The known wasn't working. In November of last year, shortly after Doug and I parted, I found an apartment called 31 Place. The building is owned by a Thai woman named Rossi, who has also lived in the U.S. for 43 years. We connected immediately. She is warm, open, and caring. So when you connect with a landlord, that means you're handing over a pile of money, but whatever. That's a beautiful bond. I moved in December, and the next morning she had breakfast delivered by her maid. Yes, maids are common in Thai culture, otherwise known as servants. She knew I hadn't had time to get groceries. This is only one act of many generous acts of kindness she has offered me. I feel included in the little community 31 Place offers. Thank you. The buildings are close to a canal in the middle of the city. There are only 7 floors with a matching building next door and a saltwater pool in between. The apartment is filled with light from windows lining the wrap around lanai, which is lined with potted trees for privacy and a feeling of nature. I fell in love with the space. It's a city dwelling in one of the most condensed, crazy metropolitan areas in the world. On my lanai, I can see lit billboards displaying consumerism at all hours. This is the only time in 10 years that she has gotten political on us, was that sentence. Seriously. But, interestingly, with all the vegetation on the property and my outdoor space, I feel like I'm in my own little oasis. Before I found my home, I found a gym. People like this woman like to use the word I, by the way. Exercise is an important part of my lifestyle that I had missed for almost a year. I knew getting back to taking care of my body is priority one. At the gym, I connected with a young woman named May Koroswan, who became my fitness guru and friend. And by connected, she means, here's some cash, be my friend. Sorry to be cynical here, but what the fuck do you think that is? Her patience and her knowledge in restorative fitness as well as strength and flexibility training, has healed what ailed and made my body strong again. Through the gym, I also met many friends, including my physiotherapist, Michael. I felt immediate kinship with him, and his magic hands restored my bones and muscles. And your magic money went to him so he could be your friend. Oh, sorry. In combination with May and Mike, my body feels better than ever. I feel truly blessed. In addition to the amazing beings, May and Mike, I also met an angel, Desiree. From the first moment we met, I was in love with her energy. We became fast friends. Desi is a very busy model and gifted photographer. When she asked if she could do a photo shoot with me, of course I said yes. I've never been the subject of an artist's creation until I met Desi. It was one of the best experiences I could have imagined. For an entire afternoon and into the evening, I acquiesced to her requests so she could create me using me as her subject. It was so fun and honestly a transformative experience. I freely expressed with her direction. Fun, who knew? Building community in a foreign city can be a challenge, but I was fortunate to find Internations. It's an organization where expats and travelers can connect with others who are either living in BKK or visiting. I've met many interesting like-minded friends through this group. How it works is the ambassadors in the organization create events for socializing at different venues around BKK. It's a great way to see new restaurants and hip bars, as well as meet creative, diverse, free-thinking humans. Wow, that is some political action there. Solidarity, baby. Through Internations, I've met women from all over the world, and I felt inspired to organize and host a weekly women's group at my home. Our gatherings now consist of women from Germany, Middle East, India, France, Singapore, Malaysia, Brazil, Thailand, and the USA. And what I noticed from the beginning is that regardless of the country we are from, or culture or ethnicity, we all strive for freedom. Freedom inside ourselves. I love these women and am so grateful they have blessed my life with their openness and willingness to explore the depths of themselves as inclusive beings. In our short time together, I have learned so much. There's some generalities there masked in some vagueness. Life offers gifts everywhere we turn when we pay attention. One of the many gifts that came out of my relationship with Doug is Julia, his daughter. We didn't have the opportunity to meet until she visited her dad when he was staying in Chiang Mai. They stopped in for a 4-day visit before they traveled to Sri Lanka. I fell in love with this bright light the moment we met eyes and hugged. I have been blessed with 3 sons, and now I feel like I met my daughter. Well, when the world revolves around you, you can claim someone as your daughter, lady. When I see her, I see myself in so many ways. After her trip to Sri Lanka and return to BKK, she asked if she could visit me for a while. I said yes. We spent 10 days, just the 2 of us, at my place and created a bond that will now last our lives. I am deeply grateful for our connection, her openness and love. She has filled a place in me only she could. I love you, Julia. And I love you, alive girl. We'll be back right after this message of a commercial nature. As many of you know, I love to cook and entertain. My home in BKK provides the perfect venue to do just that. So of course I attracted a community of eclectic, diverse, energetic party enthusiasts. And I've been able to create gatherings where expression is contagious and connection is imminent through sharing food, laughter, dancing, and, yes, a little craziness. Another gift. It's been almost 7 months exclusively in Thailand. I've created a home base for now, and I feel renewed, healthy, and ready to begin drifting again. Which is really a hard life. The drifting, where you just go from one country to another and spend money. I have some ideas, but very few set plans. Really? Because I've fucking seen that for 10 years on Facebook. Except you don't have any ideas. You have no ideas and very few set plans, drifter. I do know I'll be in Seattle to see family and friends for the month of June. And I know I'll be traveling until mid to late September. That is the update. Thank you for your friendship and for following my journey. I hope it's added some value to your life. I love you. And I love you, alive girl. Listeners of the podcast will be back after this brief commercial break.
On the drive to the backside of the island, there's a cemetery for 150 offenders who died while incarcerated.
So we have numbers from 1 to like 142. We don't have any idea who they are. There are no records that I'm familiar with. In my 28 years, it'll tell us who's buried in those places.
Private homes scatter the rolling hills on the island, but they have been empty since January. When the Department of Corrections leaves McNeil Island at the end of June, they're going to do a cold walkway. They're going to turn off the electricity and the water and leave the island. And that includes boarding up these gorgeous homes from the 1930s. Gertrude Island is just offshore. It's a seal preserve, perfect for sunbathing on warm days. McNeil is also known for its abundance of wildlife and natural areas. And for people who lived here, there was a community center and school for kindergarten through 5th grade. The building even has a 2-lane bowling alley. But the most fascinating part of the tour is going inside 2 Cell House, the original segregation unit that has changed very little since 1907. It was still used up until the mid-90s.
This is where we kept the worst of the worst until we could either get them to modify their behavior or we sent them to a more restrictive prison.
The McNeil Island Corrections Center has been home to some infamous criminals, including Charles Manson, Charles Manson, Charles Manson, Charles Manson, Charles Manson.
Podcast, shout out, where we talk about our favorite and least favorite podcasts. Conan O'Brien needs a friend. I subscribed to this for a while and then I just had to cut it off. I think it was Conan was interviewing Howard Stern and they were obsessing about, everyone talks about how I went to Harvard, Conan says, how I went to Harvard. Well, I worked my ass off to get to Harvard. So he's being really sanctimonious about his privilege and just, okay, Conan needs a friend. And who are the friends being interviewed? Well, we have all very famous comedians, and that's it. So, Conan, you're old now. You're not the young, hip thing anymore. So we are not going to do a podcast shout out for you. Instead, we're going to talk about Les Show with your favorite and my favorite comedian, Harry Shearer of Spinal Tap and Simpsons fame. Les Show really is a 1-hour weekly radio show. Not sure if it's even in podcast format. I guess it has to be. Shearer has been doing this for decades every week. And there's some stuff that I like about it, some stuff I don't like. I love Harry Shearer. I think he's funny. One thing that's a little disingenuous is that he is an incredibly, incredibly wealthy man. And he does the podcast either from his home in London, his place in Santa Monica, or where he lives most of the time in New Orleans. I don't know, it's something I want him to be honest about that. He's a lefty, he's a progressive, he's political, but he's not going on the air and saying, oh, you know what? This is how much money I have and this is what I'm doing with it. He does a great Trump imitation. I don't know if that's him or a guest that he has on, and he does these parody songs with Trump singing that are hilarious, like Stormy Daniels, you're as cute as a bucket full of spaniels. He does the Tom Brokaw imitation every episode, and that gets tiring. Or Canada, Tom Brokaw, Canada. The other joke that he makes every single time is the Olympics. It's a movement, and we all need one every day. I want that joke to stop. It's a poo-poo joke that is stupid. The other parody songs he does are like cookie cutter, heavy metal kind of Spinal Tap things. Recently there was a funny parody commercial for Allerfree. Allerfree, the ingredient-free drug from the makers of Placebrix. You're not going to be allergic to this drug because there's nothing in it. And they do Apologies of the Week is another section he does where they find people who are apologizing for their misdeeds. Karzai Talk is funny. I'm sure he's been doing that for years or decades. And Afghanistan public radio. So, yeah, Les Show. One thing I don't like is that he will play an entire song or two to fill out the hour. And it's usually some of the New Orleans white musician, Hojank, Dr. John kind of thing, boomer stuff. But, as far as boomers go, we like Harry Shearer. So that's our podcast shout out. Les Show with Harry Shearer. One proposed section of this podcast that we haven't gotten to yet is Bezos Town, where we talk about the world's richest man and his impact on the city of Seattle. We'll see if we can do something next time with that. We also have Green Diversions, where we talk about marijuana, but that is boring and we haven't gotten to that yet. And Nirvana Walk. Nirvana Walk is about food, specifically solar-powered induction wok cooking. Maybe episode 4 will have some space for that. We'll wrap up this episode with Condiment Vehicle. That's where we talk about food. And what is food if not just a condiment vehicle? This time, the Impossible Burger. Okay, for this episode of Condiment Vehicle, we will be talking about the Beyond Burger, which is awful. So as the Brazilian rainforest burns because a fascist government is encouraging it to burn so that more land can be cleared to satisfy the global demand for beef, what a perfect time to review review a bland of meatless hamburgers. Sadly, these burgers are not going to get many beef eaters to cross over because of the problems. It is a champagne problem, as some rich people say, to not like the taste of Beyond Meat's Beyond Burger in a world where so many suffer from food insecurity. In other words, it's a rich person's problem. And boy, do I have a champagne problem with the Beyond Burger. Namely, that it tastes oily. Water is the first ingredient on this relatively expensive products list, followed by pea protein, and then canola oil, which is gross tasting when heated, and coconut oil loaded with saturated fat. They also list pomegranate fruit powder, which is the kind of bullshit, unnecessary, trendy ingredient whose sole purpose is to give a sense of self-satisfaction to food trend followers. That kind of sums up this whole product. The Impossible Burger, that's now being served at some Burger King locations. It's edible. The Beyond, we'll get to that on another episode. The Beyond Burger is not. But I'll give you this. It's better than the old style of veggie burger. Remember those tasteless, soulless bundles of grain? Come to our potluck and throw some veggie burgers on the grill. The previous sentence contains 12 words that should strike fear into the hearts of everyone who knows what a Seattle potluck is like. There might not be food unless you bring some. If the host does provide food, it will more than likely be a generous pot of beans. $18 for a 50-pound bag. Bring your own booze. We won't provide any liquor. It's not that kind of party. And of course, bring your own tasteless veggie burgers to throw on the grill next to the hornet-attracting salmon medallions and the real burgers. Going to a Seattle party, potluck, or art opening? There is no guarantee that you will be fed. Hell on earth. Speaking of hell, what exploration of food innovation and disruption, those are two overused Silicon Valley words, of course, could be complete without mentioning who invented the Beyond Meat thing, Ethan Brown. Together, we can truly take exciting change to the plate and beyond, he says on the package, which is made of cardboard in a giant plastic tray for 2 patties. There's just 2 patties in there, in this particular configuration, and is full of comforting reminders. No soy, vegan, no gluten. By shifting from animal to plant-based meat, We are creating one savory solution that solves 4 growing issues attributed to livestock production: human health, climate change, constraints on natural resources, and animal welfare. Yeah, fine, those are good goals, and it's a great marketing thing, but the future of protein, unquote, has to actually taste good. A whole list of capitalist fuckheads have invested in Beyond Meat, including Bill Gates and chicken mass murderers Tyson Foods. Gates is also all in on the next generation of nuclear power. Tyson runs a monopoly of animal death camps. So next up on a future episode, we'll test the Impossible Burger. The Beyond Burger tastes like oily scabs dipped in coconut, cloying. I grilled them on a grill. Don't get me started on how environmentally unsound and ugly the typical smoke-belching American backyard grill is, whether it be gas or charcoal. Solar-powered induction cooking is coming in the future. We're doing an episode about that. So I added some cheese. I added tomatoes. I added bacon. I added every condiment imaginable. And it still sucked. It was an oily scab. So what is a hamburger or a hot dog other than a condiment vehicle? I mean, if condiments can't save your sandwich, nothing can. Okay, let's wrap up Doomed Planet Episode 3, Sex Offender Island, with an endorsement, our first. Bernie Sanders for president. Now, this podcast premieres January 1st, 2020. We're recording these well in advance. Right now, Donald Trump is still president, for example. Anyway, Bernie. Call Warren or Biden or Buttigieg what you will. Shameless opportunists, Wall Street sycophants, spiritually unattractive, morally bankrupt, assholes. But you have to admit that Bernie is far to the left of all of them. For God's sake, Elizabeth Warren was a Republican who voted for Ronald Reagan. I'm not sure I know anybody who voted for Ronald Reagan. But if I did, I'd never let them forget it. They'd never hear the end of my Reagan jokes. You know, the Democrats would be considered a right-wing party in more enlightened parts of the world. Are the Democrats not the party of free trade / union busting, escalation of the drug war / throwing minorities in prison, and more recently, under Obama, the party that is waging a drone war in the Middle East? Only the Republican Party's Palin-esque Trumpian far-right evangelical idiocy and radical obstructionism distinguishes them from the Democrats. Here's a fantasy. Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield of Ben & Jerry's ice cream fame campaign for Bernie. In reality, they sold their company to Unilever, a Dutch multinational conglomerate, in the year 2000. Because of capitalism. So all that social justice branding made them members of the 1%, but their donations to charity and to progressive causes are a nice gesture, I guess. Granted, Ben and Jerry are not on the level of evil scale of someone like Bill Gates, who created his fortune by ripping off the entire world with his monopoly and is now giving some of it away on his terms. No, Ben and Jerry created a pretty cool company that made delicious ice cream and then sold it to a monopoly, and now they're giving some of that money away and spending some of their valuable time working for Bernie. Capitalism, disguised as 2 old hippies. Capitalism wins. Winners take all. Thank you, Bernie Sanders, for dragging the Democrats to the left with your idealistic talk about somehow reforming capitalism by urging capitalists to be more gentle as they destroy the planet and drive the human race and countless other species to extinction. We wish Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was old enough to run for president, but we'll settle for you, Bernie, you mensch. So thank God Hillary and her frail, sleazy husband and her awful, transparently untalented, materialist daughter will never hold public office again. But, you know, at least the Clintons got their money from Wall Street and not from an 8-figure deal with Netflix. God, the first thing Obama did after he left office, this is true, was to go to Richard Branson's private island in the Caribbean. Yeah, and along with this job goes the title war criminal. So, I mean, what president has not been, by definition, a war criminal? So that should be interesting. Bernie Sanders, war criminal. The price of gas is low right now, and Americans are once again rushing out to buy giant gas-guzzling vehicles, which is sheer lunacy. Sadly, the rest of the world wants the same thing. They want a car, a husband, a wife, a house, 2 cars, a $600 phone, a $1,000 phone, your husband, your wife, money, power, more power, 3 cars, 5 houses, 10 houses, a yacht. This all ends badly. There's not going to be much employment for people in the future because robots and cyborgs will do most of everything, including being doctors and lawyers and creating advertising campaigns for politicians. But that's okay because of smartphones, a technological miracle that unites us all. There is an app called Periscope that allows you to live broadcast your life from the phone, and people respond with texts, emoticons, and strangest of all, graphical hearts that are created by tapping on the screen. It's great interacting with people from all over the world until you realize that for every intelligent conversation or interesting scope, like walking your dog at the beach while talking intelligently, for example, there are 100 bored teenagers with nothing to say and 1,000 dudes smoking pot. And this is worldwide, not just in decadent, depraved America. The revolution will not be periscoped or FaceTimed or whatever that shit is. At least not by the kind of people who film themselves accepting compliments from strangers while not actually doing anything productive. Drifting. One Periscope broadcast I had the displeasure of seeing recently was from Mississippi, entitled In Art Class. It featured 4 girls sitting around a loud classroom looking into their phones. There's no teacher to be found. I typed in, "Who is your favorite artist?" and they could not respond. They could not think of one single artist. Picasso, Warhol, Walt Disney, Banksy, nothing. Smartphones, indeed. Of course, who needs art when you have STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math? STEM being emphasized by tech plutocrats like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. Why create something beautiful, art, when you can be creating something ugly, like yet another app that tracks our behavior or heart rates or otherwise violates our sense of human decency and privacy? Gates and Bezos don't want more art. Gates does not want more art, other than the billion-dollar art collection his kids stand to inherit. He wants more engineers. He's a realist, I guess. The most talented artists in the world won't be able to create his next-generation nukes or manage his tax evasion scheme/foundation, so to hell with them. As protesters battled Seattle cops during the 1999 WTO riots, Bill Clinton was downtown giving a speech to WTO delegates and other VIPs. Tellingly, he called out the devious Italian proto-capitalist Machiavelli for praise. One of the things I've learned with all trade cases is that once again reaffirms the wisdom of Italian Renaissance political philosopher Machiavelli. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but this is almost exactly right. He said there is nothing so difficult in all of human affairs as to change the established order of things, because the people that are going to win are always going to be somewhat uncertain of their gain, whereas the people who are going to lose are absolutely sure of what they're going to lose. Avaricious global free market capitalism, the established order of things, as enabled by Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump. Gary Locke was the governor of Washington State during the WTO events. The day after the riots, he told a local TV station, "I think we have really restored order to Seattle. People should feel safe to come downtown. People are working downtown. No lines in the shops for Christmas shopping, and the WTO is proceeding." And if you were downtown that day, you saw Old Navy was boarded up and whatnot. Locke would go on to work for law firm Davis Wright Tremaine on trade deals with China before becoming U.S. ambassador to China because of capitalism, not the power of hope or a political revolution or whatever Pete Buttigieg is saying. Capitalism. Noam Chomsky, America's sanest, most reasonable political pundit, recently said it best about Bernie's half-baked socialism. The fact that Bernie is regarded as extreme is a comment on the shift to the right of the whole political spectrum during the neoliberal era. Noam calls Bernie an honest New Dealer. Some people are old enough to remember that FDR's New Deal was designed to save capitalism. True socialists want to destroy capitalism, not work within the system. Like Bernie. But for now, it's Bernie. Here's the good news. When the human race ceases to exist, nature will blossom very quickly. You'd be surprised at how fast an area of Brazilian rainforest will grow back once the humans who have annihilated it leave. The future of our planet will be about plants and animals, not humans and their unfortunate, ultimately doomed financial schemes. And that's a comforting thought. Vote Bernie in 2020. The Doomed Planet podcast is part of the Wild World News Network. You can find us at doomedplanet.com.
5, 6, 7, 8. Goodbye, this is it.